Hey folks, this is Totally and welcome to some more game dev. We're jumping in today and looking at a few bugs and a few maintenance items. We've done the last few streams where we've been focusing on some content creation, kind of building out the world and creating some more maps as well as more cutscenes, but today I'd like to take a bit of a break from some of that content creation and kind of just fix up a few small bugs we've been seeing over the last few streams, as well as kind of just do some maintenance on some of our tools. With that being the case, let's take a look at a couple of the ones. So we wrote down a few bugs, I think last stream, where we were going to take a look at the hit notification failing to align on enemy death. So that's definitely one that I think I want to start with. And in terms of maintenance, we've been kind of seeing this issue where the required flags as a list on the prop loaders is hidden currently inside of the show internal metadata stuff. So inside of here, we have to do show metadata in order to get a list of the required flags. And I'd like to make it so that that can instead be shown directly on the prop. So if we switch over from here to like this one here, yeah, this one has a required flag, but if we turn off the or minimize this drop down, it's not showing up in here. We had originally set it up so it could only have one flag, and we needed it to be a list. And so this information needs to be showing up down here in our custom UI. I don't want to have to go digging through these kind of like deeper sections to find that information. So a little bit of maintenance, a little bit of bugs. So I want to start with the hit notification because I'm hoping that won't be too difficult. I have a broad understanding of what the issue is. I have no idea how I'm going to fix it, but let's validate that what's happening is what I think is happening. So we're going to come in here, and you know what, even before we load, we're going to make it so the enemy only has 1 health, so that when we defeat them, they'll die on the first hit, which should be a good way to repro what's happening here. So if we go to the enemy prefab, which should be somewhere in this area. Yeah, this one here is currently the one that's placed. And we set HP to 1 and then give this a run. We should be able to see hitting the enemy and the hit notification will fly off, and I think it'll just spawn in the center of the screen. In order to make this even more clear, we could move the enemy closer to where we start. That might make this a little faster to test as well. Load times are a little long is also a potential concern. We might want to close and reopen Unity. It may have been open for too long. We have to watch this cutscene every time as well, so another reason to potentially move this enemy to be closer. Oh, we don't have any attacks. We need to also update our debug information so that we are starting with some combat abilities, and I am going to just move this enemy to be a little bit closer so that we don't have to walk as far in order to actually hit it. This will also move it to be less in the center of the screen, which will make the hit notification bug more obvious. Okay. Yeah, so the text is not spawning correctly. So I think what's happening is when we spawn the hit notification, it's after we've already checked on the health of the enemy, and the enemy has basically died. And because it's dead, we're not finding it, and therefore we are not sure where to position it. And I think it's just failing to align and just remaining wherever it would have last appeared. In this situation, because we've had no combat, the text is defaulted to the center of the screen. So all that being said, let's take a look at the hit effect prefab and validate that assumption. So in here, we do a damage effect, and then we do damage hit, which is a notification. And that notification ability effect is... Oh my god, stop with all the prompts. Okay, so if we look here, this is applying a sequence step, which at the end of the day is basically sending this information. Yeah, and this gets sent here, which inside of this part, it's just basically allocating a UI element for the hit notification. And once it's allocated, we get specifically the hit display component on the UI, and this is constructing its own sequence to do the like fly effect. That all being said, where does alignment happen? That must be separate. So if we take a look at our fastest is probably going to be to go look at the UI and then go in here, combat, UI pools, hit component, hit element. This is the actual prefab that shows up with some text. And this information here has a align to unit component. So this component is doing the alignment code check. So when we allocate it, it should be calling update data, updating the information with the unit that we're going to try and attach to, initializing it, which is going to be setting some refresh information, which is fine. And then all the way down here, we actually have the actual refresh component, which is also called an update. And the refresh component is calling align to unit, which is doing a bunch of alignment code. As long as stored data is not equal null, we get the sprite renderer. And then depending on some different code, it'll try and do 3 different versions of alignment depending on which version of the game it is. Because we've done this in a couple of different ways, so that one's kind of complicated, but at its core, it's essentially just grabbing the unit and just like trying to position this UI element to be in the same spot on the screen as where it is in 3D space. That's what all of these different computations are basically doing. Okay, so if we take a look inside of the sequence step, we should be able to see the moment that we allocate it, we will get this update call. So I'm going to attach the debugger. Yeah, so that's set up. I'm going to turn off the align breakpoint for the time being, because there may be other situations where that will trigger. Oh, and we need to go back to the actual room we were in originally. I feel like we might want to also just close Unity. I think it's going to take me a few seconds, which is a shame to shut stuff down. We'll have to reattach the debugger and whatnot, but like I think that the slowdown we're seeing would be, we're going to save time in the long run by closing and reopening Unity now. Yeah, even shutdown it's just I've had it open for way too long. So let's go back up to here, leave that up while we're doing this. In the meantime, how's chat? We doing good today, folks? Hope everyone's having a good Sunday. This has been like 5-ish weeks. I did not update this, but we are here now. Technically the first week of September, I started on the 31st. So technically this has been 5 weeks in September, even though that doesn't really add up. Open up Visual Studio again, attach the debugger. And then I'm just going to continue trying to update this real quick. And then these two should both be this blue, I think. Yeah. And today we're working on bugs and some maintenance, which I'm going to make sure I spell correctly, which I'm going to steal from the YouTube title. Okay. And I still failed? I still failed. Okay, cool. Thanks, autocorrect. Let's see here. That's attached. Debugger is set up. Now let's see if this runs faster. Go to this scene. It doesn't even matter. Don't save. And then run. How long does it take to load this time? It's not much better, but a little bit better. Appreciate the hydrate. Unlockable characters. Okay, so if we hit here, we should hit a breakpoint. We did not hit the breakpoint. We are attached. Re-add the breakpoint and try again. I've been doing pretty good. Last couple weeks, we had Drixie on 2 weeks ago, kind of doing some art stuff. And then last week, I feel like it was mostly me just being like, I'm not sure what to do next. And I think we did end up finding a path forward. But I think in general, there's kind of some major... questions we still need to answer in terms of content creation, which is part of the reason today we're going to take a look at some bugs and just do some general maintenance while I continue to think about kind of the overarching plot of the game and some of the major kind of points that are going to inform some of the level design and other things. There's just some big decisions I need to make that are kind of blocking us from being able to do much more content creation, at least do effective content creation. And we have had a couple of bugs we've been seeing, so it feels like a good time to stop and just have a stream where we kind of clean some stuff up. So it is what I'm thinking. So we've already applied the knocked out status effect by the time we go to try and apply the hit notification, which means it's just not doing the alignment at all because it's seeing the enemy is dead. So how do we reorder this? I don't know if there's a great way to reorder it. Let's take another look at the hit effect, because I think what's happening is that inside of this ability effect, the damage one, this is where we're actually subtracting the health of the enemy. And we're doing that here. And we need to do this formula to get the amount of damage done, and we need to finish this before we can do the damage hit notification, because we need that value. But because the damage is being applied, the enemy is already reduced to 0, which means it gets the knocked out status effect immediately. So we either need to let the alignment still do the alignment even if the enemy's knocked out, which I think there's a reason we don't do this. There's a reason that we don't want to do alignments to knocked out enemies. I think it's going to mess up some parts of the UI potentially. Or we need to delay the knocked out status effect. This must have some sequence step it's building, right? Yeah, it's applying the modification and the action. The other option is that at the same time that we apply the knocked out status effect, or like maybe we could have the hit happen here instead of being its own effect. But that's not quite right. Like, I want it to be able to be separate here. Yeah, I think I've known about this bug for a while, and the reason I haven't fixed it is because it is kind of a weird, like, paradox of my system. I want my system to be flexible so that we can add all of these different ability effects, and we don't want to have these types of, like, you know, the hit effect built directly into the damage. We want it to be a separate piece so we can move it around and rearrange it and have it happen at different moments or different times if we want. But it's almost like the damage application here needs to be separate. Like, the damage ability effect that calculates maybe needs to be separate from the actual application of the damage. Let's see where that leads. Let's see where that line of thinking takes us, because we have the damage being output. What if we just separated this into two different pieces? That'll keep my flexibility. In fact, it makes things more flexible. This feels like maybe the right direction. Okay. Unlockable characters on Twitch says, was thinking about how horrifying it'd be for the Demon Lord. The guy takes over the entire world, infects everything, and then from his perspective, this random dude breaks into his place, steals some rusty tool, and then 5 minutes later just dismantles his entire empire and kills him. I mean, I don't know about 5 minutes. I think in the long term, it'll probably be like within 24 hours, if not a day or two. Like, but yeah, we also haven't technically shown the Demon Lord, so that may not be exactly how it may not be exactly how you're thinking it's going to play out. But I don't want to get too much into some of that stuff off the bat. So how do we figure out the damage? Like, in here, this must know the damage amount. This is the sequence step. Where is the actual default hit notification? Here. Yeah, so this has a hit value. So if we steal that, put that at the top here. We're not going to need to do any of the damage formula logic. And it looks like there's some dead code here as well. I don't think predict internal is going to need to do anything. We just need to make it so that the actual application, the value here, is going to be calculated from here. And all of this gets replaced. Not quite all of that. Sure, let's say that's damage. Okay. And then the damage effect would need to not do this. Basically, the damage effect would have no apply. It would still do everything else. It would just set a property, but it wouldn't actually do any of the sequence steps itself. It's just going to calculate. And in some regards, this should probably be renamed to calculate damage effect. And now all the logic is happening here. This wouldn't need the set property part of it. And then we're going to get rid of some of the old comments as well. Also on YouTube, I see some comments. Mohammed says, hello. how's your life? How's the game? Any good progress? Some progress. I feel like it still feels a bit like we're stuck in this kind of like whirlpool of like trying to figure out what the narrative is, and that's kind of like blocking a lot of forward progress. Me and Drixie had like a really good conversation about like what we want to do in terms of like the overarching like plot this morning, and I think that's going to help inform stuff, but some of that I don't want to do on stream because I feel like talking about the overall story and like the themes and like the main twists is kind of not something I want to do on stream. But that's kind of the next blocking thing, is I'm having a hard time figuring out like how I want to lay out the maps. Like when I look at the map layout, trying to figure out what goes in some of these other rooms now that we've kind of got the base tutorial figured out, it's tricky because I kind of need to know who are the characters we're going to run to. What are their beliefs? What are they trying to achieve? What are they doing in the world? And those kind of questions are kind of blocking kind of the level design in some regards. Like, it's not required. I could build levels, but I think things would feel better and make more sense if I knew more of what we were trying to achieve from like a story standpoint. And we have like the main crux of it, but I feel like I just need to spend more time just really nailing it down more. So we're gonna change this up. This will now be the apply. And I think everything that does damage right now thankfully uses this hit prefab. Except for the AI, it has a slightly different process, so we'll need to update it as well to have a new apply damage. So we'll do apply damage, and this apply damage takes this damage component. Did the hit need anything else? It did not. Okay, so we're just going to apply damage. So now the damage effect is now really more calculate damage. Then we do damage hit notification, and then we apply the damage. Cool. I think that makes sense. Unlockable characters on Twitch says, I agree with that. If you create the character / history first, the world building naturally happens rather than characters being set pieces and being internally consistent. I mean, my hope originally, I will say, was that if we did like an isekai based theme, that at least for the niche audience that understands isekais, which is the target, that like we wouldn't have to do as much world building, because it's like, oh, reincarnated, summoned by a goddess, you know, sent to this world to stop a demon lord, like trope. I get the basic idea, so I wouldn't have to do as much world building. It was meant to be almost like a bit of a cheat in some regards for making it so I didn't have to do as much. But it also has been kind of eye-opening to realize that it's not quite that easy, and there's still, obviously, for a narrative-based game, some amount of narrative that we need to do. I'm realizing, does this apply damage need to be maybe down here somewhere? Like, because the miss might also need to target the enemy as well. So I think there might be... this apply might need to be a little bit lower. The problem is if the... Do we only get into here... We only get into this section if we hit. If we miss, we don't get into this section. Does the miss need to know? No, the miss doesn't care. These are branches. These are branches. Okay, so none of this delay stuff should affect the apply. I'm just going to put the apply at the very bottom because I think that should be fine. And that should hopefully mean that everything has finished doing what it needs to do with aligning the UI to the enemies before we kill it. So then same thing here. Just going to make sure that the apply is below everything else. Yeah, this is all fine. And then what is this damage effect? Oh, is the damage effect... This looks to be another base component for actually hitting something. I'm not seeing any blue in here. I'm not sure what's using this one. Sometimes I wish that there was an easy way to check references to see like what prefab is referencing other prefabs. Okay, I see what's happening. So the damage effect is what's being referenced in here inside of slash, and then the damage effect itself is referencing this blue one, which is the hit effect. Okay, so the hit effect is the base bottom one, and we've now changed it here, and we've changed it in the AI's simplified version as well. So now we should see the damage apply after we've aligned the hit, and the bug should go away. This may create other bugs. But we will come to those, or we'll find those as we kind of continue to test. But I think this will fix this bug. So we are applying the notification. We're going to put this breakpoint back. We hit here, we refresh the component, we align, and they should not have a knocked out status effect yet. They do not, and we do align the information to the enemy. And we didn't see it because of all the breakpoint stuff. But if we disable all of these and then try again, we should see that the hit notification now appears over the enemy. Yeah, it does. Okay. So that seems to be working. This is another bug, actually, that I think I might want to tackle next. Sorry, I keep opening Aseprite instead of Balsamic, but let's go back to the bug list. So this is solved. Did I create other issues by my solution? Maybe. But for now, we can say that that is complete. I do not have a good way of marking those, so I'm just going to move it down here, complete. Just so I can keep track of it. But another bug I'm realizing is enemies respawn on switching maps. I would like to make it so that enemies only respawn when the run is over. And I'd like to see how that plays out. And I think that might be the next thing we want to take a look at here. This enemy's running away. Cutscene is still triggering, which is funny. Okay. Yeah, that's working. Cool. Let's see about making it so enemies only respawn on... I think it was here originally. Only respawn on new runs. So we're going to need some sort of flag system to keep track of each of the enemy spawns for each area. And if that spawn has been set to complete, then don't spawn this enemy again until that flag is reset. YouTube comments. Mohammed asks, are you planning to make a separate PGM for every map? Or are you already done at this bog? I'm not sure what you're referring to. I'm not sure what a PGM is in this context. I don't understand the question. Please rephrase. Okay. So, enemy spawn. How do these work? How do these actually spawn enemies? We add them to the spawner. So these are not data driven. That's the other thing, is I technically, everything else, like the props, the grass, all of this stuff gets inputted into a scriptable object that essentially represents the room. I don't know where those are. These ones? Yeah, these ones. So this has all the data about every single tile, And every tile has information about like whether or not it has walls, whether or not it has props, any kind of pathing override, what type of terrain, sound effects it should have. All the information is in here. But I kind of got a little lazy when it came to the enemies, and rather than actually put the enemy information inside of a tile, I'm just having it so that this class on Awake is adding the enemy spawner to the dungeon state manager. Which I think I would like to fix at some point, but that is not a priority for today. That's a refactor. We're not looking at refactors right now. We're looking at bugs and maintenance, which you could argue maintenance is refactor, but I'm drawing the line here. Okay, so when this spawns, which happens when we initialize the dungeon, we go through and we spawn all the enemies. Enemy state defeated. There's an old system here. This is from Era of Embers, the first game we worked on. We had a system for making it so enemies didn't respawn after you got out of a encounter, because in the Era of Embers game we were working on before Infinite Retries, we had it so that the enemy would trigger a random encounter battle when you touch them, and then you, after the fight was over, I had a system to make it so they wouldn't respawn. So there's kind of a remnants of that old system still built in here. I'm gonna guess nothing is setting this though. Handle battle results. Yeah, so this was a call that would happen after the random encounters, which would set the enemy to defeated. I think I want to replace this with the flag system. So we already have something for checking if the valid flags are true. Oh, minimized one too many. We already have something for checking valid flags, but this is more making sure that like a certain cutscene hasn't triggered or a certain event. This isn't necessarily tied to the enemy. I think I'd want something more directly related. Let's take a look at the flag backend. Flag manager? Backend flag manager. So this creates a number of flags for a couple of different situations. For the design data, for the quest, for the locations, for the scene, for the cutscenes. I think we need something that creates a flag or generates a flag for each enemy. I might have to do that refactor now if I want to fix this. Because it's going to need some way of knowing where the enemy spawns are. And right now we don't have that in any kind of data. It's just added in real time as you enter each scene, we spawn the enemies. And we have a concept of like a state for each enemy. We don't have a concept of like that data accessible at like the moment the game initializes. Okay. More comments. Are these small just practice? are these the real sizes levels when you have a pass at the beginning? I'm interested to see how you lay out towns and places to interact with characters. That's fair. So the current plan is that this is the size. Basically, each map is essentially a room, not unlike something like Zelda or something. When you enter into it, we see that whole world, and we can move around this 20 by 20-ish grid. I'm not actually sure of the exact size. It might be like 16 by 16. But if I said spawn all, this would be the full size of the screen. And so no map would ever be larger than this. For towns, we're thinking that you would have like a building, and then you would be able to walk down the street, essentially, and maybe in the front we would show like a cover of the back of a house or something. We're still trying to figure out how we represent like things that are basically rendering off screen. Like, does it dither down to like darkness from the front of the roof? But like the town stuff is something we'll have to get to, but it would still be in these small chunk like versions. Drixie did some amount of work on that at some point, like some concepting, but we have not gotten there because we still want to get through this kind of forest chapter 1 and the dungeon chapter 2 before we get to the town in, I think, chapter 3 is the current plan, but that may change. Can you explain why and what a flag is for the enemy? So at its core, the game kind of has this flag system, and essentially a flag is close to a Boolean. It has 3 states: not started, started, and complete. And so a lot of the game operates on flags. So inside, if you've ever used like RPG Maker has like a Boolean manager that you can have like a whole bunch of different things that run based off of that global like Boolean tracker. It's not unlike that system, but the idea here is that like I have a flag called like Adventurer Lost, and this enemy or this NPC only spawns if the required flag Adventurer Lost is not started. As soon as Adventurer Lost is set to complete or active, this NPC will no longer spawn. And that's how we control, like, as you work your way through this dungeon area, you'll run into this adventurer early, but then if you circle all the way around, by the time you come to the other side, the adventurer will be gone and just their mace will remain. And so flags are essentially a way for me to track different pieces of information. So when I say that I want to set up the enemy to have a flag as it's whether or not it's spawned or not, what I'm saying is the old system doesn't operate with this new backend system of flags, and I'd like to adapt it to use this more like newer concept that I've been working with. So that all being said, the thing about the flag system is it does need to know at runtime when we start up every possible flag that we're going to encounter. We can't dynamically add one right now for a number of reasons. I probably could adapt it to be more flexible, but I kind of like the fact that it just has all of the information built into it. So I need some way for the enemy data to be stored somewhere, and to make it so that that data allows us to create a flag that we can set, and if that enemy is defeated, we will set that flag to complete, and when we start new runs, we'll reset those flags. That seems straightforward to me. The problem is just getting the data. So we're gonna need to store this. Now, if I store it in the tiles, that's going to be a pain, because we're going to need to keep track of that information, or more accurately, we're going to have to dig through every single tile to find whether or not it has a spawn on it. So this asset probably could have enemy information inside of it. What about the scene design data? What is inside of this JSON file? This has an ID for each scene, and it also has a list of interactable flags. Okay, this might be where we want to store this. let's take a look at where scene data is updated in here. Scene data. That's cutscene data. Scene design data. Add scene design data. So this loops through and finds all the interactable tiles and adds them to the scene data. Yeah, okay. We want to do the same thing here, but we want to do this for the enemies. Now, we're going to need to find all of the enemy spawners, dungeon enemy spawners. We're going to find each of these. We're going to make sure that it's active in the hierarchy, so if it's turned off, it doesn't get added to the design data. I don't think we care about the tile data in this situation. Oh, funny enough, we also don't need it up here. It was just a copy and paste thing. Okay. And then we're not going to worry about the generate flag. We're going to need a new list in here of the enemy flags. Enemy flags. And we're going to put that here and here. Generate interactable flag. How does this work? Oh, neat. It gets the transform position and the scene name, and it puts those together to make a flag. The problem is that's not quite generic enough. You could have an enemy and an interactable on the same spot. So we're going to do generate enemy flag. It'll take the same information. Actually, I'm going to just make it even more generic. We'll just have it take a transform. And then this becomes enemy transform. And we will add enemy to the front of this. The flag system related by the actions on the objects in the map only, or the actions too. 3 flags means 3 actions. The flags aren't really tied to actions per se. They're more just like anything in the game could have a flag associated with it for determining whether or not it's spawning, whether or not it's appearing, whether or not certain cutscenes should play, whether or not this thing is interactable. That can all be based off flags. And all of those flags can also be used to determine other things that, like, they're kind of just a way of tracking the player's progress in a lot of ways. But it's decentralized. So it's not specifically tied to a specific thing. It's just like they all kind of just feed into this one. Or sorry, it's not centralized on each individual object. Each object in turn makes the flag manager create a flag for it, and then anything can ask the flag manager, is the specific flag set? It doesn't need to go find every single object and ask it about itself. I'm going to add enemy here. There might be a cleaner way to do this, but I'm just going to add this string to the front. So the generated flag will be enemy, scene name, location. And as long as that's unique, which should be, because you can't have multiple enemies in the same scene in the same spot, then this should give us a unique flag to work with. So we're going to come in here, we're going to do this, we're going to do dot transform, and then from there, that should get us the data we need. So enemy flags get set to a new list. We loop through all the enemy spawners in this scene. We set a enemy flag for each one. That should get the information we need. Now we come back to this area here, and as part of looping through the scene data, we'll now want to loop through the enemy flags, and we want to create a flag for each of these IDs. Now, we are going to want to make sure that when we create it, we are going to tell it to reset on new run. So there's a parameter here for reset on new run. These flags, whenever you start a new run, will get set back to not started. So then when you kill the enemies, you'll be able to go back and forth between the maps as much as you want, and the enemies will never respawn. But the moment that you start a new run, it will reset this flag back to not started, and the enemies will spawn again for that future run. Okay, cool. So that is that is setting it up so that the data is being saved. This is setting it up so that that data is then being used to generate flags. The next half of this is making it so those flags are being checked to decide whether or not to spawn the enemy. So inside of here, we don't need this whole call. We just need to check this logic. I need to steal a little bit here. We're going to say, we're going to have a function for is valid, and this is going to get added in here. I think this chunk can be removed at this point. But I'm going to see where this leads. So if it's not valid, we're going to skip it by continuing in this function. We're not going to load it, we're just going to continue. So if it's not valid, skip it. Now, in order to check whether or not it's valid, we're going to need to know this enemy's ID. Yeah, that's not really helpful. So this is tricky. We need to generate the same ID. Yeah, okay, so let's go back to the generation part. So when we generated this, in order to make this ID, we had to have the enemy transform, which really is the enemy spawner transform, and we needed the scene name. With those two pieces of information, we could make the string value for this. Enemy ID. And then from this, we can do a... we're going to need to also grab the utilities.hash, which basically turns the string into an integer, which is easier to fetch. We can put this into here. We need to have a I guess because we're copying from somewhere else, this technically can just be like this. Sorry, brain work, thank you. Perfect, okay. So this is valid should function now in that it will need the enemy transform and the scene name, and from that piece of information, it will be able to regenerate a string that will be the same as what we created on the data side. And then we'll be able to get from the backend flag manager, has that flag, or is that flag currently not started? And if so, we treat it as valid. Okay, I don't know if that makes sense, but the point is that this is what we're gonna need. The trick is we can get the dungeon enemy spawner.transform, but I don't think we have the scene name here. We don't know what scene we're in. We have the scene hash, which is here, but we'll need the string. So that's not hard to get. We'll just need to pass it in. Okay. So, quick balsamic. Essentially, we have the scene. The scene contains the enemies. We're going to put this data, grab one of these arrows. We're going to put this data into a scene design data JSON file. Like it's just being stored. And then that data is then being used by the flag backend manager to create a series of flags. So we're getting essentially a flag for each enemy essentially. And then when we go to load a scene, so when we load the game, or more accurately load the room, we're going to check is flag set? And if it's not, or if it's set, don't load enemy. If it's not set, load enemy. So we go from the scene with the enemy data, we put that into the scene design data, that gets fed into the backend manager, which creates a flag for each enemy. And then when we go to load the room, we check to see whether or not that flag is not set, and then we load the enemy. Otherwise, if it is set, then we don't load the enemy, because the flag represents whether or not the enemy has been destroyed. Oh, I missed your comment. I have no idea about OpenGL or Python. Sorry, but I hope you have a good day. Thanks for stopping in. I'm realizing we're missing something though. This is checking to see whether or not the flag has been set. This is generating the flags, but nothing is actually in the game setting it. So we need a, I don't know what these shapes represent either. It's just like random squares and triangles for how my head is processing this. On enemy death. Set flag. Okay. So this is the part we're missing. We don't have this figured out. We've got everything else kind of working. We just need to figure out on enemy death, which we were kind of just looking at. Let's do knocked out status effect. This seems like a reasonable place to track this. We could also do it on apply damage as well, but I think this makes more sense because if the enemy dies in some other way other than damage, this should cover it, hopefully. So when this status effect gets added to the enemy, this is like playing animations. This is doing a bunch of post notifications. I think anywhere in here is fine. Let's do a... Oh, flag, backend, flag manager. Oh, technically it's backend manager, because the backend manager controls all the smaller ones. So we want to do set flag. Am I just wrong? That is not what it's called. So many backend managers. Which one's the real one? State manager? Yeah, this is the one I'm looking for. So here we need to set a flag to complete. So now we run into the same problem. We need the ID for which enemy we're setting to defeated, basically. I don't know if we have that information. Yeah, we have information about the unit, its sprite renderer, but I don't know if we have the data about where it was on the board. And where it was on the board is going to have changed. Oh, this is a problem. Okay, so scene data, make a flag for each enemy. But for the enemy's death, right now we're not passing, like, each enemy is going to need a notification, or it's going to need some sort of it's going to need some sort of identifier to say this is who I am. And it doesn't look like we give that information to them. It does get the entity ID inside of the AI state machine. So this, I think, is meant to be its unique identifier. But it's not used anywhere. Yeah, this unique identifier isn't... It's only unique for this room. It's not unique over... Like, it doesn't have enough... doesn't have enough information to differentiate it. Okay, so... Technically, we have the information we need here. So we can pass it into the enemy and say, hey, hold on to this. You're going to need it. And then we are going to want to pull this out, generate flag ID, because we're going to need to do this in 2 different spots. Pass in here, this data and this data. Cool. And then this needs to return this information as its parameter. Okay, so then we can use the same call up here to generate the flag ID based off of this information. This needs to be... It's going to be slightly more efficient if we turn it into an integer first. Now we can just do that here. We don't have to worry about doing it later. And then up here, this just needs to be an integer. Okay, passing data around like crazy, but we are going to store this in here, and then at the moment that the enemy gets knocked out at this point, we don't currently grab that AI data, so this class isn't grabbed. Okay, that's fine. So what we can do is we can do a try get. Nope, can't do that. Never mind. We'll have to do it the long way. We can get a AI beta state component. If that component does not equal null, aka it exists, it's not a player essentially, then we can get the flag that we are setting inside of it. Okay, so if this is an enemy, try and find its flag ID and set it to complete. Okay. All right. So that means now we have fully set this up. So we have an enemy. We save the information about that enemy into the scene design data, which then generates a flag for each of those enemies. And then on enemy death, that flag will get set to say that it is dead. And then those flags we set up reset on new runs. It's just a parameter we set up so that it says that if you start a new run, that enemy will respawn. And whenever we load a room, we just check to see whether or not that flag is set or not set to determine whether to load or not load. Cool. That should just work. Couple small things. We do want to make sure that we make some small edit here and save so that it regenerates the JSON file. So I don't know which one this is, but one of these should now have enemy flags in it. One of these should not be set to null. This one's set to an empty array. Interesting. Let's take a look. Inside of where we generate level data. Let's make sure it's actually finding the enemies. So we get here, we get oh, really? There's a dungeon enemy spawner underneath. It should have found this. Dungeon enemy spawner. At the very least, it should have gotten in here, because there should have been... Yeah, it's failing to find this dungeon enemy spawner. Oh, I see the problem. I have two different classes. This is the problem with working on both this version of the project and the old version in the same project. We have like Heir of Embers and Infinite Retries in the same Unity project. And sometimes we run into problems where this is now looking at the old Heir of Embers version, and we needed to look at the Infinite Retries version. So I have to add this namespace to the front to say, hey, this is the one you're looking for. So I was checking to see if it could find the other class with the same name. That's a funny bug. Okay. So we're gonna move this a little bit just so that we can resave. We hit here, we find an enemy spawner. One has the active set. And we get some data in here. So this number represents that enemy, and it should be a unique number for this map. And no other map with any other enemy should have that same value. So if we walk in here, defeat this enemy, and then leave, oh, it failed. It failed to find an enemy. Okay. Okay, we messed up somewhere else. Easy bugs. Something else I did was wrong. What did I write poorly? Well, it looks like it's probably that. It did not get into... Did not get into this function, it didn't look like. again. Didn't hit the breakpoint that time. Okay, for each of these scene design datas, it should be trying to find... It should be trying to make a flag for each one. Okay, I need to see... The problem is it's going to do it for every single one. Oh. No, that should be still fine. Oh, it's not. I see what I've done wrong. So this check here says that if we don't have any interactable flags on this map, just continue, skip the rest of this. But now this cannot be written this way. This needs to instead encapsulate this for loop. Because it was, if it didn't have an interactable flag, it wouldn't even check for the enemies. Okay, that's a fun bug. We'll do the same setup here. If it does not equal null. I don't know why I did this though, because realistically, if it's null, oh, it's because it's going to complain as it tries to loop through it? Sure, okay. But it's an easy fix. We'll just do that. I could lament whether or not that's necessary, but it's gonna be fine just to leave it. The one extra if check on load of the game is not gonna kill us. Okay, here we are. One enemy creating a flag. Perfect. And then here we should find that flag. We do. It's a generic flag that's not set to started. Or that is set to started. So it will spawn the enemy. Let's, for now, turn off the rest of the breakpoints just so that we don't keep getting interrupted. Get through this mini cutscene. Defeat the enemy. That should have set the flag. I didn't see any errors. And now with that flag set, if we exit and come back in again, the enemy should not respawn. And it does not. However, if we start a new run, this should reset the flag, and the enemy should spawn again. And it does. Perfect. A couple of small things I want to fix. I was doing a demonstration of the size of the world. I need to make sure that I turn this off again. And we're also going to revert this value just for safety. Small thing I also noticed is when we revive, we're facing south. I think we should face east. Yeah. That should make the landing here look better, because right now it looks like his feet are on top of the pillar when we spawn in. Close. We need west, but otherwise that is better. Perfect. So that's good. We now have a concept of the spawns. The only thing we'll need to make sure of is we need to come in here and we're going to need to save every scene, basically. Just to kind of replace... Yeah, I'm going through and just adjusting one thing slightly so that I can hit save, and then it should regenerate the data for each of these scenes and actually add all of the enemies' information So this is I've only done this for this area. Any of our older maps will technically be broken in this new setup. But that should all be all we have to do so that now enemies only spawn... enemies only spawn on new runs. If you go back and forth between maps, you cannot trigger the enemy to respawn. We're just going to drag this down here for now. Out of sight. Okay. Enemies respawn on switching maps. That bug is taken care of. / new feature implemented. I guess I should take a quick look at what exactly was this old system doing. This enemy defeated. Was that the only thing the enemy state handled? Yeah, pretty much. It used to also handle the position, so wherever the enemy was when you went into a random encounter, it would make sure that the enemy was there when you came back. Again, that's all Heir of Embers. Because all the combat happens on the grid for this version, or for this game, none of this is necessary. So, realistically, I don't think we need to save any of this. Like, I don't think we need to save the state of the enemy, because it's all just saved via the flag system now, because it's the only thing we really care about, is whether or not to spawn the enemy. Yeah, so I think I can remove all of this from the if statement, and all of the save load. Interesting. I don't want to do that on camera right now because I have a feeling that that's going to potentially cause other issues. So I'm just going to write a list for off-camera cleanup. Off-camera cleanup. No longer needed. Cool. Hydration from unlockable characters. Appreciated. Wow, okay. So these two bugs took us 1 hour and 20 minutes. That's insane, but that's fine. Let's look at something small. Sword reappears on later runs. So when we come back to this location, this sword has been reappearing, and it should not. Oh, is it because it's using the old required flag? I think that might be all of that is. Drixie with the stretch redeem. Oh, alright. All right, we have converted to standing desk. We're not doing squats. We're going to do a stand for a little bit. All right, we're going to pick up the sword. And then I guess we'll have to walk back here in order to test this. I feel like I might want some sort of debug system for being able to choose a specific location to return to. Like, not for the whole game, but just for the, like, an override debug to say, hey, whenever we start a new run, please start in this map at this location. I feel like that would help with, like, improving test times so that we don't have to be running through the whole thing every time. I'm not sure. I think I can outrun this slime. Oh, we still have combat turned on, the combat debugs, so we actually have access to attack, and I still have him at 1 HP, so that's fine. We can just walk right by. Oh, right, and then, yeah, I had some debug testing I was doing with the boar. That's why I was like, why'd the boar start on screen? But that was some stuff I was playing with. And the sword is still here, even though we picked it up. Okay, so that's not the problem. So something is making it so this appears, even though its required flag should not be set. Well, let's take a look, actually. I realized I was looking at some stuff the other day, and I realized we have a debug for this. So if we clear and then go back to game view and we hit this button, it'll show us the state of all the flags. Huh. I had thought I had made a change to this. Did I revert some work? I had made this a change. I changed this so that it actually gets the title, I thought. No, I definitely made changes because I added this get debug title. Did I just never finish that work? It looks like this is only used for the debug tools. So yeah, so we'll just... I set everything up so that it can use the debug title, but I never actually hooked it up in the end, it looks like. I must have gotten distracted. Okay, now not all flags have good debug titles, I don't think. Yeah, some of them are still numbers. Let's clear one more time and hit that. Yeah, so like some of these have names associated with them, but some of them just still are numbers because of just the way the system works. The question is this going to be one of the good ones that's going to have a name, or is it going to just be a number? It's going to be one of the ones that's just a number. Okay, so this still doesn't help me. Okay, so there's more work to be done here. Let's take another look at it real quick just to see without the debug information. So it should have a required... Oh, I see what the issue is. Its required flag is on Forest W01 being set. But that's not the cutscene anymore. The cutscene has been changed. Because we're now in... It is this one. This is the trigger name. That's the addressable name. I think it is just this. I could have just copied it from here, but I wanted to go take a quick look at it. Okay, so this is what we need set to not started. I guess technically we don't have to start a new run. We can just leave and come back. And that'll have the same effect, I think. Okay, yeah, it remained gone this time. Okay, cool. Oh, interesting. Do I have this bug marked down anywhere? This is complete, but we found a new bug. I think I had this from, honestly, back when we were working on the game for that break in December, but I don't think I've ever fixed it. Exiting a map with an enemy about to act breaks the game. Let's see if we can reproduce that. I shouldn't even need to pick up the sword. Just like leave, go into the other map, and then come back out. This is a pretty bad bug too, because like if we were to make the demo and send it out to people, this is like a hard break. It just like crashes. Technically, you'd be able to close and reopen the game, and the autosave that happens between each room would make it so you didn't lose any progress. Yeah, so not exactly an easy repro, but is reproable. The steps there were a little different, but basically just exiting and coming back in breaks everything. Yeah. Okay, so what is happening? The enemy is doing something. Yeah, so we're saying we're done. What this part of the sequence step is saying is we're finished. This is the part where we're done with the turn. We're saying that the player is done with their turn. And then from that player's done turn, it's then getting sent to some different pieces until eventually reaching all the way down to unit site effect. Okay. And this is a bit of code that basically says if the tile that just got revealed has an enemy on it, then try and have that enemy spot the player? Or... Huh. This is a complicated call stack. So this says player director, finish your turn. And then inside of the player director, this is executing the end turn ability. So let's go take a look at the end turn ability. What is that doing? End turn. Is that this one? Certainly looks like it. It's just calling the end turn ability effect, which in turn is calling end turn, which causes the combat state machine to update internally so that we don't skip a frame. It's making it so that everything is as efficient as possible. Okay, so then that's where we then start getting into ability sequence step. Perform ability. So I still think this is all just going through until we get to the combat internal. Change states. Here, end of turn responses. Yeah, okay. So what's happening is we're ending the turn. And when we end the turn, we queue up some response. Well, oh, sorry. When we end the turn, there's a state that checks to see, does anyone have anything they want to do? And at this moment, the AI has a thing that it has queued up. Right, okay, I remember what this bug is. Cool. So the AI has queued up an action. And when we leave the map, that action is still queued in the list. And that list of queued actions is global, so it doesn't unload when the map unloads. And when we come back in, so this AI right now has I've walked into the map, and this AI has said, hey, I want to queue something up for the end of the turn, and I would like to do an alert to say, hey, I see enemies, I'm active, I'm in combat. That has been queued at this point. But when I step here, the ability that plays is the exit the room ability, and that exit the room ability never gives the enemy a chance to execute its actions. And so it's still queued up in the background. So if I take one step, now at the end of this turn, this is the first time we've given it the chance to say, hey, check for any queued up end of turn abilities. And it's trying to run that on the attacker, but that attacker no longer exists. And therefore it fails. It can't, this attacker is null at this point. It's been deleted. We could try adding an if check, like they're asking here for if null. But I feel like this is that kind of just band-aids the problem to make the error go away and to stop the game from crashing, which is good. But it doesn't solve the underlying issue. Because I feel like in this situation, the enemy says that it wants to play the effect of, hey, I spotted an enemy. It wants to play that end of turn sequence, and it wants to play that at the end of the turn. But technically speaking, this is not the end of a turn. Oh, that's interesting, actually. The turn ends. So if we look at the clock here, we're at 4:58. When we take a step here, the turn ended here. That was the end of the turn, 4:57. When we walk in here, this is all just kind of smoke and mirrors, but this isn't actually a turn end. No action has ever been taken on this map, but we've queued up an action to happen. I feel like you should see the enemy alert immediately upon entering. Because if you think about there being an enemy like right here as you enter, which I probably wouldn't do, but if I did, I would want to have it be an immediate effect. So I think the actual bug is that when we first enter a room, we are not giving a chance for end of turn responses to play. Which feels weird because technically no action has been taken. But on loading the room, there's technically things that we want to resolve. Interesting. So the question becomes, where can we add that? I think the combat state machine gets regenerated each time. So we used to add end of turn responses here. The question is, why did we comment that out? And what's going to happen? Well, it's the same question, but what's going to happen when we turn it back on? This might break stuff in a different, more fantastical way. Let's check some timing. So add response happens here. There's 5 places where it happens. Unit visibility is on reveal. Tile, backend, cutscene, foe. This is the spot we're looking for, I believe. Yeah, when we alert the enemy, we want to do this alert ability sequence step. Okay. So that should be where it's happening. I want to add a breakpoint to the combat intro. Here and here. So when we leave, where is this happening? This is adding some responses for when you step on this tile. So we're gonna disable this breakpoint for now. Okay, and then we're getting into the state machine running its logic on initialize. And we're coming in here and we're trying to find any responses for movement and any responses for intro. And this is kind of playing the initial cutscene of the character walking into the scene. And then we immediately get here to the intro sequences again. What is this one grabbing? There must be a reason why we do intro a few seconds later. There is an ability response waiting. Which is the boar. Interesting. So the boar is having its... Okay, so we set up all the movement stuff. I think I'm understanding. So we do all of our movement tech to have the cutscene for the player walk on. That happens here. Then at this point, we then check for any more queued up responses or cutscenes that we want to play. And at this stage, there is a response for the boar. And it's trying to do a unit sight effect. I believe this is the alert ability that's been queued. That's this? Interesting. Okay, it's not where I thought it was. I thought it was going to be this attack. Oh, this is on enter. If we get hit, we trigger the alert as well, but that's not the one that's actually happening. It's this visibility system where on reveal, we check to see if we can spot the enemy within or around us. So when our tile comes up, we check for an enemy. Okay. So this has already happened. We've already queued up, and that's what we're looking at here, is that queued up sequence. And that queued up sequence is a spot ability. Interesting. The problem is that spot ability in turn is going to queue up an end of turn. But it would be too late at this point to catch it. Okay. I can validate whether or not what I'm thinking is happening fairly easily. This is, I don't love this, but what we can do is we can add another action step here that is going to check for end of turn abilities. And we can add this on like a slight delay. And I think this would trigger delay sequence step. And just delay for like half a second or something. We're just testing. Hello, Nemi7. Welcome. We are down the rabbit hole of small little bugs and some maintenance stuff today. Deep in the codes, trying to fix some small little bugs. Overall, it's going pretty good. Managed to close out a couple of bugs so far. Mainly just been doing these Sunday streams to make sure that I'm doing something each week. Trying to keep me always moving forward at least a little bit. So I'm going to check here. Do we find the queued up spot? We do not. Interesting. Oh, because we haven't yet... We're not in the right room yet. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, so here we're queuing up something. I think this is walking into the room. Yeah, this is walking into the room. And then this is grabbing that queued up, walk into the room. This is now on the reveal. Yeah. Inside of the bore, it's doing the tile reveal, and inside of the tile reveal, it's triggering a reveal check for the bore to see if it sees anything. It does, and it's queuing up a response for at the end of its turn, which is the one we've been seeing. Okay. So then this will get that sight effect. It's going to add that to the list. It's going to queue that up. And then here we're going to check to see if we get the queued up effect yet, but it doesn't look like we've gotten there in time. Oh no, we have. Yeah, okay. It's hard to tell, but I think it's still broken. Okay. Let's turn off the debugging. Also, questions in chat. Let's turn off all these breakpoints for now. Trying to make my game for months now, and all the time I've just scrapped what I've have them redo everything, not getting forward, and now I've just got bare bones and trying not to overthink stuff. Learned scriptable objects earlier and still not getting it 100%, but enough to find a use. What is your game about? So, yeah, me and my wife Trixie have been working on first a different game for a couple of years, and then this one for the past 2. So it's been like 5 years of working on this engine, and I would say that like I've spent a lot of time. Yeah, it's still not queuing it up until after that little alert symbol I want to happen sooner. It was spent a lot of time scrapping and rebuilding for the first few years, but I feel like I'm finally at a point where I've got most of the Lego pieces figured out, most of the tech I want to have built, and now it's just a matter of putting the game together is finally where it's starting to feel like we're at, which is maybe the hardest part for me. As for what the game is about, it's kind of so it is it is 2.5D, so this is all some magic. But essentially you are hero reborn into this isekai world in which the goddess has summoned you to save the planet from the Demon Lord. The title of this one is Infinite Retries to Defeat the Demon Lord, and the goddess is putting forward you on this quest to defeat the Demon Lord. And every time you go on a run, it starts over. It's a kind of like a time loop experience where you have a set amount of time to try and stop the Demon Lord. And recently we've kind of decided to like keep scope creep down. We're going to break it up into chapters, and so each chapter you'll have like a set amount of time, and you'll need to do some things to prevent the Demon Lord from resurrecting, essentially, in order to stop them from coming back. And then as you solve each chapter's main point, you'll move on to the next chapter where you'll enter into a new time loop. And each time loop is kind of a puzzle to try and figure out how do you, number one, what is it that you're trying to do in that chapter, as well as trying to accomplish those goals. And so we're pushing back the Demon Lord's miasma right now as we're moving through exploring the environment, and every time that we do a run, we're gaining more intel about the world. We're getting more access to items, we're getting new abilities, we're finding and interacting with more adventurers, and eventually we'll be able to get through chapter 1 and get into like our first little dungeon section, and then chapter 3 will be the town, and then we have some broad ideas beyond that, but for the most part kind of building the story as we go. Oh, Drixie did a pass on this floor. I did a sync of her latest art. I should run the processor here. Just see if that floor is in now. Yeah, that's better. It was just pure brown before, but she's done a pixel pass. So that's kind of the main idea of the game. In terms of combat, I'm trying to do like this isometric grid-based thing, but I'm trying to mix in some like Elden Ring-esque kind of feel to it. It's turn-based, but each enemy has like a set amount of turns before they act. So this enemy takes 3 turns before he does his like green attack. And this little icon here represents what action he'll be taking. So you can have different abilities that might have the same charge time, and then each of your attacks also have charge time. So the slash takes 2 charges and the bash takes 4. And so there's kind of, I'm trying to get this idea of like damage windows and punish windows in something that's turn-based. So like trying to figure out the timing of when you should be attacking. So if the enemy has like a charge time of 3 and you have an attack that is a timing of 2, then you can get to hit before he goes. But I'm trying to figure out some more complicated stuff of like, oh, I want to try and do this attack so that when he does his attack, depending on what he chooses after that, I might be able to get in a good punish window. And like there's parrying and some defense stuff as well. I don't know if it's going to come together. I'm still experimenting a little bit with all of it. But that's kind of the broad idea of what I've been trying for combat. It's been interesting because I want to have a single turn-based character action game, or sorry, not action, but like I want to have a single party member tile-based movement combat game. And I feel like that is kind of tricky to make interesting because most turn-based games tend to give you multiple characters to move between. And I feel like those multiple characters help keep things fresh so that it doesn't like it doesn't feel like you're just doing the same action over and over again. And like trying to find a way to mix up the flow in the turn-based world has been kind of tricky. Yeah, I don't want to go deck builder or anything like that. I just want to give you 4 actions that you can perform and try and find some way of pushing or pressuring the player to make different decisions. And that's been a hard challenge, but kind of going with this punish window idea and like each action having a certain amount of time associated with it has kind of been a neat way of going. I think it works. It also pairs really well with the kind of timing aspect of you only have so much time to try and complete stuff. So gaining the ability to defeat enemies more quickly or being more efficient not only makes it so that you take less damage, but also allows you to potentially get more done in a run. And the whole map is fixed. So every time you reveal a map like this, it will remain revealed forever, basically for that chapter. So every time you do another run, you'll be able to also see the paths you've taken, and you'll be able to navigate more easily because you don't have to do as much exploring on future runs. I don't know. That's the basic gist of it. It changes all the time though, as I kind of find more problems and more things that are working or not working. Some of it's still kind of placeholdery, but yeah. I was trying to figure out this bug. Okay, so I'm still not sure about the timing of this. So we just make this have a really long delay. Curious if that helps. Yeah, I mean, it's been, like I said, technically if you count some of the early project stuff, like we did a lot of the combat stuff in the first few years on the other project. If you count all of it together, it's been like 5 years of developing the art style, the tools, all that stuff. It's just in the past 2 years we've been trying to move to Infinite Retries as like quote unquote a smaller title. I keep scope creeping, but yeah. Yeah, adding more delay does not help. By the time this triggers, the enemy just isn't gonna queue up his response. Oh, it's because I copied this as well, isn't it? I need to comment this out, because this is transitioning us to a different combat state on the first one. That would imply that we're never getting to any of this other stuff, I don't think. I'm not sure, but I'm going to try commenting that out and see if that is the thing that makes the difference here. Yeah, I'll try one more time. Yeah, I will, just on the looks great comment still one more time, I will say that the majority of the past few years has been just the art stuff. Like trying to get Unity to behave with pixel perfect has been a grueling task. Like even these floors are actually like a series of smaller cubes or like diagonal lines. The actual texture that we're rendering is diagonal, and I figured out a way to have Drixie make art pieces that look exactly like how it should look in the world. And then I wrote a tool that does an algorithm to convert that floor into that more like diagonal, so that when the camera then reads all of the information on the 3D geometry, it gets rasterized back into the same flat image that Drixie originally wrote, or drew, I should say. Yeah, here. So this is what... that's a bad example. Oh, because I'm clicking on the base version, the template. So this is what Drixie drew, and then that gets converted into this, which then when the camera sees that information in 3D, it goes back to essentially looking exactly pixel perfect how she drew it. Yeah, that, and like even just getting like when those assets are like sliding up and down, just getting like all of that to not like, you know, have blurriness between the pixels, so that this pixel like here is never going to be in between, and we never get like half a pixel. If you freeze frame it, every single pixel is perfectly aligned as it's moving. So yeah. I've also thought about making a 2.5D, but in a less pixel art style for 3D objects, and only using pixel art for sprites like characters or some objects, and keeping things mostly 3D. That could work really well too. I just got really obsessed over time with like just making it so that what Drixie draws renders exactly on the screen. Like there was points in this project where it was like we could just draw something and let Unity rasterize it how it wants, and maybe some pixels are just not rendered, or it just picks some random ones a little bit, but it just became like a challenge of like, can I make it so that it actually, you know, is pixel perfect. And even like the alignment and the angle of these assets and everything, and the orthographic size of the camera, everything had to be like wired in to get it so that all of this stuff is rendering exactly right. It also works if I move the camera, but in the end we found that it was just like weird. There was a lot of weird artifacting with camera motion, so we ended up going for a fixed camera. It just solved a lot of other problems. But the tiles still move, so there's still motion. It's just not the camera moving. I think... yeah. I think we're at time though. We are at the 2-hour mark. We stream every Sunday from 2 to 4, and then from 6 to 8 PST. So I'm going to take a 2-hour lunch break. I will be back in 2 hours. But I find it's for me personally, way more healthy to just take a 2-hour break, kind of think about all the stuff we've done, figure out what I want to do, and then come back from 6 to 8 and get some more done. But every Sunday, Game Dev. If I don't see you, I hope you have a good day. Thanks for all the folks who have stopped in today. As always, we're peaking right before we get off. Maybe I should shift the times at some point to like 3 to 5 and then 7 to 9. But I don't know. I've been like in this time frame. But I'm going to stop. I'm going to go get some food. See unlockable characters. Have a good night. And yeah, for now, this will be Tolhi signing out. Later, folks.